Late rent payments are more than just an inconvenience. They are a serious threat to your cash flow. As a landlord, you cannot afford to overlook the importance of timely payments. Handling late rent payments requires a balance of firm policies and fair communication. From setting clear expectations in the lease to offering flexible payment options, managing this issue early can prevent it from spiraling out of control. But if you ignore late payments or fail to act, the stakes get higher. You could face extended vacancies, legal fees, and damaged tenant relationships. I'll show you how to handle late payments effectively and keep your rental income on track. Here's a story about one of my early rentals where I didn't handle late payments properly. It spiraled into a bigger problem than I ever expected. Now, this probably sounds familiar, as I think every landlord has gone through this. There's warning signs. Okay, so let me think back here. There's been so many over the last 27 years, but there's one that kind of really stands out in my mind. Not going to mention any names, but this person, he had a late payment just paying his security deposit. Now that should be a warning sign. If you can't pay your damage deposit, how are you going to pay rent on time? Okay, so this is a 1-bedroom unit. The guy lived alone. So the security deposit is late. He's a few days late on his first rent. And then, of course, he pays just a little bit. And then we hear, and this is very typical if you've been a landlord for a while. Oh, I'm just in a new job. I'm getting paid for my first paycheck in 3 weeks. I missed the payroll period. Second time he's late rent, his grandmother passes away. Of course, we're going to give him a little bit of leeway, right? The third time that he's late in rent, food poisoning. You see a pattern here? Now, this is the most memorable part for me. He's late a fourth time. Now, this is like every single month. So the fourth time, his grandmother passes away again. You heard me. I mean, unbelievable, okay? So I want to talk to you about what I call, especially with our clients and my staff, the point of no return. And it's how, our obligation of landlords is not to really get it that bad only because you feel bad, okay? I think you need to realize that when you have a rental property, it's not your ex-house or the house you used to live in. It's not just something that you're doing because you've heard it's a good idea. It is a business and you need to treat it that way. Okay. So what I mean by the point of no return, when somebody gets behind, let's say that the rent is $1,500 and they get behind by $500. Maybe they can get out of that, okay? Because it's $500, it's 1/3 the rent. They can afford $1,500 in rent. Probably they can make some payments or pay that $500 late. Okay. But if you let it go a few months and now $1,500 becomes $4,500, there's going to become a point that it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, I wouldn't be able to be that behind and make my current rent and make late rental payments. So there's going to become a time that you are going to have to choose where you can't let them get beyond that because they're just not going to recover. And if they can't recover, they're going to get evicted. That's not good for your feelings, your emotional well-being. It's not going to feel very good owning a rental property and you had to throw a family out. I think it's our moral responsibility as landlords to make sure, that's why I talked about it to be our obligation, to make sure that you don't let somebody get that behind. You don't have to think of it as you're being mean or you're not giving somebody enough latitude. I mean, again, it is a business. If you owned a restaurant, would you let somebody give them credit for coming in once a week? $1,500 worth of food. Can you even imagine in a restaurant? They'd have to eat every day in your place of business for an entire month to have $1,500 worth of food. If you're a cafe owner, I don't think you would allow that. So why would you allow that in your rental property business? And then allow it for 2 or 3 months because you quote unquote felt bad. And now they're in a hole they can't get out of. You're going to then have to take them to court. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost them money. It's going to damage their credit and their reputation and their ability to rent future properties, probably forever. That's what I mean about being at our responsibility. Some people just aren't that great with money. And if you can get on them early enough, you save yourself the headache and you teach them how to be a responsible resident, okay? So, preventative measures. You want to set clear expectations in the lease regarding payment deadlines and or late fees, okay? And what I would recommend, because a lot of lease documents, they're pretty boilerplate. They're going to say, the start, the end date. They're going to have the amount of rent. They might have some consequences. I highly, highly recommend that you have your own schedule of rules and regulations. And the first line is how you deal with late rent payments, eviction, what the late fees are going to be, how often they are going to be accruing, and what the consequences for those are, okay? So that's my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice, offer convenient payment methods. There are just a plethora of online rental portals, payment processing companies. You can have e-transfer, that's probably the obvious one that a lot of landlords do here, but maybe you have a larger property management company like ours. You can do online rental payments with the banks, credit unions, okay? So you can be a bill payee, pardon me. You can get pre-authorized withdrawals. You can do post-dated checks for those who still deal with checks. You can pick up cash. So there's the more payment methods that you can offer, the easier that you can make it for the tenant to pay rent, the most likely that they're going to pay rent. Why put, roadblocks in front of them? Okay. Now, third thing, how do you address late payments? Okay. Are you going to just leave it, say, well, it's their responsibility? No, you want to communicate quickly with the tenants about overdue rent. This is where my brand of property management, being collaborative and empathetic, and you're going to hear that quite a bit. That's where you want to be firm but fair. Okay. So what I mean by that is maybe you're going to provide a small grace period, a couple days, maybe 4th or the 5th of the month before those evictions and late fees start coming across. Because stuff happens, there could be business days in there. But if you're going to provide a grace period, make sure you draw a hard line. And if it's the 5th, then it has to be the 5th. Okay, and you have to have those consequences for non-payment, preferably again in the rules and regs signed at the time that they signed that lease. Repeat offenders. Okay. When do you want to consider payment plans or legal action for a repeat offender? This is pretty important. Here at in Manitoba, we've got the residential tenancies branch. So if you're local and you follow me, and you know what, anywhere in North America, you're going to have a branch of law, government, whatever it is, that is going to tell you exactly how to deal with these types of repeat offenders. Now, of course, what I mean by a repeat offender is they pay on the 7th, you get on them, maybe with a warning letter or a paper eviction notice, and then they pay the next month, or maybe they're okay for a month, it happens again, and then it happens again. So what I always advise our clients with a repeat offender, paying rent isn't the only, it should be one of the most important, but it isn't the only indicator of being a good resident, okay? Yes, paying rent on time, but the other is respecting the property. So if somebody is late all the time, but they keep a good place, they've been with you for years, you have to make a decision. If it's driving you crazy, but you can handle it, maybe you let them stay. If it's causing you stress and you feel like they're taking advantage of you, then you can evict them. The choice is yours. I'm just trying to give you different opinions, I guess, options. Okay, so you could consider a payment plan. Here at least in Manitoba, we have something called a mediated agreement. And that is where you can have somebody on a payment plan and then you immediately go to, if they breach that, okay, so that means somebody is promising to pay on a certain date and a certain amount. If they breach that, meaning they haven't made those payments, then you're automatically awarded your eviction and order of possession paperwork, and you can immediately take the sheriff here, that's our process here in Manitoba, and get them out with no right of appeal, versus 3 to 4 months of actually having to go through all of this, okay? With appeals and multiple court dates and hearings, lots of money lost, holding costs, vacancy, probably some more repairs because they've been in there longer, unpaid utility bills. That's going to be for another podcast episode, because I believe mediated agreements is really a course all into its own. So in summary on this podcast, I'd encourage all of you, investors and landlords, to take a firm but fair approach to late payments. And you want to make sure that consistent communication can prevent those problems from even escalating. So for a simple solution to handling late rent payments, download my late rent payment notice template. It's an easy to use form that helps you stay professional and consistent when addressing late payments. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.